Hello, here we go with lesson 10 from your workbook. So this is very much like lesson 9. We are composing the shaded fraction into larger fractional units. Express the equivalent fractions in a number sentence using division. The first one's been done for us. So we had 4/6 at first, but then I drew these big boxes to show fewer bigger boxes, right? And so we started with 4/6, we divided it by 2/2, and we ended up with 2/3. The next one's 9/12. There are 9 of these small boxes. If we make some bigger groups, we could have 3 big groups. 3 of the 4 columns are shaded. If I divide these both by 3, we end up with 3/4, which matches our picture. C, we start with 6/10. We're gonna have fewer, bigger fractions. So now I've got 1, 2, 3 out of 5. If I divide these both by 2, I end up with 3/5. This one I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 out of 8. That's why I've got 6/8. I'm putting them back together. Composing them is the word they're using into 3 out of 4 groups. If I divide these both by 2, I get 3/4. Number 2, compose the shaded fractions into larger fractions. Express the equivalent fraction in a number sentence using division. We are pretty much still doing the same thing. 4/6 here, we're gonna put those 4/6 into fewer groups of bigger fractions. Divide by 2/2, and we would get 2/3. 8/12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of these guys out of 12. Put it into bigger groups. Looks like 2/3. How can I make this equal 2/3? If I divide these both by 4, that would equal 2/3. 3 says draw an area model to represent each number sentence below. Sometimes drawing the area model is one of the harder parts. How I did this was I started by looking at the simpler fraction 2/5, and that's how I got the lines going this way. So I made fifths first, and then I do the line in the middle to make it become tenths. And for 6/9, again, I looked at 2/3 first, made it be thirds, and then I drew the lines across to be make it be 6/9. But they are saying you can take the 6/9 and make your big groups 2/3. Or use division to rename each fraction given below. Draw area model if it helps you, so you did not have to draw the area model. I drew them so you could take a look. See if you can use the largest common factor, which means they want it to be simplest. Here's what this means. We could divide these both by 2, and we could get 2/4. But we could have an even, a bigger single fraction. So we could do 4/8 4/8 divided by 4/4 instead, and that would give me 1/2. So they're saying you could make this be this, which would be 2/4. But if you just break it up in this way, you've got 1/2. So 2/4 is equivalent to 1/2, but we could make it even simpler, which would give us a larger common factor. Use the largest common factor. Let's go to 12/16. I drew a picture here, and you can see that the simplest thing we can do here is make it be 3/4. So what do I divide to make it 3/4? I could divide them both by 4. Give me 3/4. Now if you did something like 12/16 divided by 2 over 2, whoops, 12/16 divided by 2 over 2, and you have 6/8, that is also an equivalent fraction. So still correct. We've just got even simpler as 3/4. So here's for continuing. We've got C and D. Use the division to rename each fraction given below. Draw a model if it helps you. See if you can use the largest common factor. This term, largest common factor, means what's the biggest number that we can multiply that will give us both 12 and 20. So remember, factors are like what times what. These are the factors. So they want to know what is the biggest number that you can multiply that you can get both 12 and 20. So 4 is actually the greatest common factor because I can do 4 times 3 and 4 times 5. And since I can use 4 in both of those multiplication sentences, 4 is the greatest common factor or largest common factor. You will also see this referred to as the greatest common factor in a lot of math books. So they want us to use that greatest common factor to do our division. 3/4. And back over here, if we, sorry, that should be 3/5. And here's our 3/5. Okay, so for 16/20, the greatest common factor for 16 and 20 is actually, again, 4, because 4 times 4 is 16, and 4 times 4 is 20. There is no bigger number we can use that gets us both there. 2 is a common factor for both 16 and 20, because 2 times 8 and 2 times 10, but we can go bigger than 2. So we're going to use that greatest number and get 4/5, and that matches our picture. And that's the end.